Hi, I have some artifacts about our lesson that we're going to talk about in lesson 18. And it's actually written in the Bible. It's in the book of Exodus, which is the book that tells how God delivers the Israelites from slavery in Egypt to bring them back to the promised land. How cool is that? Well, here are my artifacts. Oh, okay. What do I have? Oh, first, I have some oil. When I think of Israel, actually, I got this oil from Israel. And I think of Israel, they used to anoint the Israeli priests that went into the tabernacle with this oil, but oil actually representing Israel. One of the things that they are really known for is the olive trees and olive oil. So that reminded me of Israel, especially because I got it there. And then I have what's called a shofar. Have you ever seen one of these? Well, this is an old one. It has actually been broken off, so I can't, when I blow it, it doesn't make any noise, just wind. But they would take these shofars and they blow it when they wanted to bring in the congregation, or a significant event would happen. They blow it to signal or alarm, or to go to, when they went to war, all these things. The shofar came from Israel. I got this in Israel too. The Yalaland, made in Israel, the shofar. Okay, and then I have this, the golden lampstand. Although this is not gold, but they had a golden lampstand they put in the ark of the where the ark of the covenant was in the tabernacle, and we'll be talking about that in a later lesson. But here we have, this reminds me so much. And in December, as they celebrate Hanukkah, which is a holiday in Israel. And then, what is this? You guys all know about this, as this represents the 10 Commandments. And here you have the commandments written in Hebrew, and we're going to talk about the Hebrews, and there's also written in English. And we're going to talk about who God used to write down these 10 Commandments that were under the law, in which we in the Bible, have these commands, but that God has used them because we actually have not followed the law. And we break one commandment and you're guilty of all of them. And so the law became a schoolmaster to show us our sin, which ultimately would lead us to freedom as we seek freedom in Jesus Christ, who came and died on the cross and took our death penalty, who fulfilled the law. Okay, I could go on a lot about that, So we're going to talk about these Hebrews. No, they're not men who brew coffee, like some would say. My husband used to do that. But anyway, Hebrews were actually the Israelites, and Hebrew was their language. And you may otherwise call them as a Jewish nation. So here we have this to remember, because sometimes I used to get confused on who the Israelites were. Well, they came from the tribe of Jacob. Well, actually from Jacob, and then Jacob had tribes. The tribes were actually his sons, which developed into tribes, and which developed into the 12 tribes of Israel. So the years went on from when they went to Egypt because of Joseph. Joseph brought them into Egypt to take care of them, and there were 70 of them then. But then as the years passed, 430 years to be exact, actually prophesied, even God showed Abraham that this would happen, that here they were in slavery. And what happened, the pharaohs, as the years went past, they did not remember Joseph and his family anymore. And so they had taken this Hebrew nation with these 12 tribes, and they had put them into slavery. And all those pyramids that we talked about, yes, they had used them to build those pyramids. You can imagine what that took to lift those rocks. And they had used straws to heat up and build the blocks that they brought in for the pyramids of Egypt. The Pharaoh at that time, he got really nervous because he saw that the children of Israel were growing into a huge amount, a huge country actually, and he was afraid that they would come and overcome them and attack the Egyptians. He had all these fears, so he decided to do something very awful. he decided to have all of the baby boys under the age of 2 killed. What a terrible decree. And you know what comes around goes around, and we'll find out how God's judgment on that decree in Egypt would be. First, he sent out midwives and told them to kill the boys, the baby boys that were born, but the midwives did not do that. They feared for their lives that from the living God, the Hebrew God, which was the true and living God. But then as the time goes by and they have the decree to go out there to actually bring in the army, to bring in the baby boys and throw them in the Nile, how terrible is that? That is awful. Well, anyway, it makes me even cry and tinge that they would do that. Well, during that time, there was a couple, Levi, from the tribe of Levi, Amram and Jochebed. And they had a beautiful baby boy. And they were wondering, what are they going to do? They're going to come and surely kill this beautiful baby boy. And they tried to hide him for like 3 months. But then they knew they couldn't. So his little sister, his sister Miriam, his big sister, I should say, the baby's big sister, would be part of this. As Jochebed and Miriam devised to take a basket and put tar and pitch on the bottom of the basket and send the little basket down the Nile River. You know, they must have heard from God on this, because who would put their baby boy into a river in a basket? They were desperate, so they did it. Miriam went and took the basket, put the basket in the Nile River, and as the basket flowed down the Nile River, God had his hand on that little basket and that little boy. And that little boy floated right into Pharaoh's court area, where the daughters of Pharaoh would go down to the Nile and bathe. Pharaoh's daughter had no children. And she was sad. She wanted children in her family. And she wanted a baby, and she couldn't have a baby. And as they saw this basket floating, they went out and took the basket. And as they took the basket in, they looked in. You could imagine Pharaoh's daughter saying, "Oh, this baby, a beautiful baby boy. Oh, I want this baby for my baby. Yes, yes." So she told her maids. At first it was a secret, but then the baby cried and was hungry. And Miriam comes, "The baby's kind of hungry, and I know a lady that can nurse the baby, the mother of the baby." Maybe she didn't know she was her mother, but she brought Jochebed in to nurse the baby and paid her in gold to do this. So Moses was raised in the courts of Pharaoh until, as the years passed, he found that he was not Egyptian, that he was Hebrew. And as they went out to look unto the Hebrew nation, he became sympathetic to them. In fact, he thought, these are my people, and look at them. They're being treated as slaves. And his adopted father, Pharaoh, had put really harsh taskmasters on them to whip them, to do all these horrible things and treat them poorly. And he went down there and he saw one of these taskmasters, and he got mad. He said, "Do not do this." And the taskmaster kept doing it. So he got into some kind of scrimmage or fight, but he ended up killing the taskmaster. Then he knew that if he was found out that he did this, that he could be put to death. So he went back, and some Hebrews had witnesses and said, "Hey, are you going to kill us like you killed the taskmaster as you killed the Egyptian?" And he's like, "They know about me." So now Moses was a man on the run into the desert. You can imagine how harsh that was, to go into the desert, running there, and getting food and drink, and thinking possibly that he would die in the desert. Well, he comes on to a family out there in the desert, a family of Midianites, a man and his daughters. He comes there actually trying to save the daughters from being attacked. And the man brings Moses in to be a shepherd in his house. And he marries one of his beautiful daughters, Zipporah. So Moses, as a shepherd, he fits there and he thinks, this is my life forever, and the years pass. And Moses is satisfied in the desert, living with his Midianite family. He doesn't really know God yet, does he? He knows of the Midianite gods. He knows of the Egyptian gods. He heard of the Hebrew God, of which he had found his heritage as Hebrew. He just heard of it. But God calls him in the midst of the desert. God calls him right there, Mount Horeb is the call in the Saudi Arabian desert there. A bush is burning in the desert, but it's not consuming the bush. It's just like a huge firelight, and God speaks. Says, Moses. He calls him. He says, take off your shoes. This is a holy ground. And he calls him to do what he would have him do, to follow him. The point of Moses, I would say, at the burning bush is where he finds the true and living God, where he lays himself. He has lots of excuses not to, and he tells that he does not believe that he can do this job because God has called him to go back to Egypt and to deliver his people because they're crying out, and God wants to use him. Moses does not want to be used of God in that way, but he knows as God speaks, and he obeys. Well, God also, since Moses said he was a poor of speech, God also sends him back to his family first, and his brother Aaron to be a spokesman. God knows. And God has called his servant, Moses. So we need to stop right there. And I'll finish the story. I know you guys know the story, so you can play it really quickly, but it excites me because in our lives, we have a point where we have our burning bush, where God calls us to do something, where God calls us to go and give the gospel and to Jesus and to point to Jesus because Jesus is the deliverer. So here we are. This whole thing is a type and shadow of things to come and of our life. Have you had that burning bush experience? When I say that, it may not be a physical burning bush, but a time in your life where you know, I want to be a child of God, and I want to go where he wants me to go, and I want to do what he wants me to do, and I want to have that message. I want to be that messenger and hold that message of the sweetest thing that's ever been, ever will be, the gospel, in which angels are jealous or are envious, because we hold the most precious thing, the gift of life, the gift of salvation, the gift of God's love, of Jesus dying and raising again. What a beautiful message. Well, Moses, this whole thing, he becomes that, person that God used to deliver, in a type and shadow of Jesus being our deliverer. But Moses would point to the law, and Jesus will point to grace and mercy. Let's go on a little bit later.